My name is Polly. I was sitting at the top of the stairs, just out of sight. I could hear them in the kitchen, their voices all tangled up like a bunch of knotted shoelaces. Mom and Frank, the guy who swooped into our lives like some kind of low-rent Superman, minus the cape and all the good stuff. Frank, she's my daughter, I heard Mom say, a tremble sneaking into her voice like it was trying to tiptoe around him. Look, Sheila, I didn't sign up for this, you know? It's bad enough I gotta deal with this place being a mess and you're cooking. He grumbled so loudly, I could hear his words clear as day. Now I got my own kid on the way, and I need to think about that, not this. Say it, Mom dared him, quieter now. Say what you mean, Frank. He snorted. Not this leech you got hanging on us. What is she, huh? Just a mouth to feed. Someone I got no bond with. She's just gotta go. Mom exhaled long and sorrowful, like the air itself was heavy with regret. But where would she go? I felt like my heart was a punching bag, and Frank was the kind of guy who didn't know when to stop swinging. What about her aunt? That sister of what's his name, the dead guy? Linda? But. No buts, Sheila. Geez, you're always so soft. She's family, ain't she? Let her deal with the kid. There was a quiet beep as someone pressed a number on the phone, and my ears strained to hear the rest. Yeah, hi Linda? Frank here. Yeah, you're about to do me a solid. Got a bit of a situation. Well, no, not a health thing. It's about the kid, Sheila's daughter. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could just disappear into the worn carpet beneath me. Yes, Polly, Frank's voice was gruff, impatient. Look, here's the deal. She's coming to live with you. What? Nah, don't worry about it. She's practically invisible anyway. Won't even know she's there. I heard Mom's shuffling feet, like she was pacing or fidgeting, probably wringing her hands the way she did when she was torn up about something. Linda, it's Sheila. Yes, I know. We're in a tight spot. I can't, with the baby coming. The next voice, Aunt Linda's, cut through the line, sharp and cold like the knives she used to make her overcooked roasts. Fine. I'll take her. But I'm not running a charity here, Sheila. You better keep sending checks. I could almost see Mom wincing, even from where I sat. It stung, knowing the rest of my things in that duffel bag weren't half as important as those checks to Aunt Linda. Footsteps hammered towards the stairs, and I scampered up and into my room, heartbeat thundering so hard in my chest it nearly drowned out the sounds of the looming goodbye. Mom knocked softly, as if the force of her own hand could shatter me. Honey, she started, pushing the door open, her face all twisted in a way that let you know that I'm sorry was coming before a word left her lips. You're gonna stay with Aunt Linda for a bit. I stood there, my arms tight around that duffel bag, like it was the only thing I had left in the whole sorry world. Because, maybe, it was. With a glance back at the room that had been mine, I stepped out into the dim hallway, Mom trailing behind me like a shadow I wished I could shake. I didn't even turn to look at her as I walked out the front door. It was easier that way. Standing on the porch, Aunt Linda looked me up and down as I clutched my duffel bag, each second stretching out like hours. So you're here, Polly, she finally spoke, the words flat and hard. Hi, Aunt Linda. I managed to mutter, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't just stand there, bring your stuff in. But remember, I run a tight ship. You'll follow my rules under my roof, she said, turning on her heel and heading inside. I followed her into the house, which had the warmth of an ice cube. Rule 1, no shoes in the house. Park 'em by the door. And don't you dare drag in any dirt. I keep a clean home. I nodded, slipping off my sneakers and leaving them neatly by the entrance. Rule 2, lights out by 9 on school nights. I won't have any late-night gallivanting or nonsense, she continued, ticking off her rules on her fingers as she went. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rule 3, don't talk back. Don't question me. Just do as you're told, quick and without fuss. Her house was like a museum, everything in its place and nothing out of line. The living room looked barely lived in. Plastic covers clung to the sofas, and I'd bet my last dollar they'd never been sat on. Aunt Linda caught my gaze and snapped, "Those are for protection, not for sitting. God help you if I catch a crease in them." I just nodded again, trying to take it all in. A few days in and it felt like I was walking on eggshells that were rigged to explode. I spent my time trying to be invisible, hoping that'd save me from her sharp tongue. One day, I slipped up. I spilled a bit of milk on the counter. Quick as I could, I wiped it up, but not quick enough. "What's this, a puddle?" Aunt Linda had appeared like a whisper, and her voice was like thunder. "Wasting food and making a mess." "I got it, Aunt Linda. It's clean now." I showed her the rag, trying to prove it was just a small spill. "You think sorry and a rag fixes everything? You think I have the time and money to waste on your clumsiness?" "No, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Like I needed more problems. "Your mom sends you here like I got nothing better to do," she grumbled. "Even your own mom didn't want you, so why should I?" Her words hit me square in the chest. I stood there, jaw tight, swallowing the hurt because crying wouldn't change a thing. I knew arguing would only make it worse. The rules were clear, and Aunt Linda was the kind who never bent them. Not for anyone. "Sorry, won't happen again," was all I could get out. "You're right, it won't. Because if something like this happens again, we're gonna have a bigger problem, you hear me?" Loud and clear, I answered. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Dinner was a silent affair. Aunt Linda liked eating without the sound of anyone else's breathing, it seemed. I tried to chew quietly, making every move deliberate, wishing I could just disappear into my room already. Days bled into weeks and weeks into months, each as unremarkable as the last, until one afternoon. I was sitting on the carpet in my room, the one with the faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. My room at Aunt Linda's was just another box in the stack, nothing like my old one back at Mom's. With Aunt Linda at the grocery store, I grabbed the cordless phone from its cradle in the living room. My heart was racing as I punched in Mom's number, a sequence I still knew by heart. Years of dialing it for takeout or when there was a spider too big for me to handle alone. The phone rang and rang. On the fourth, she picked up. "Yeah? Mom, it's me, Polly," I blurted out before my courage could fail. There was a pause, a breath, a sigh. "What do you want?" I miss you, Don't." She cut in, her voice icy. "Don't ever call here again." The line clicked dead. I stood there, phone in hand, her words a new weight in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the rejection that stung, it was the finality of it. "I hope that was important." Aunt Linda's voice came from behind me like a winter's draft. I turned, startled, the phone slipping slightly from my grasp. "I just wanted to talk to her," I said, my voice failing to hide the quiver. She snatched the phone from my hand, her eyes narrow slits. "You think these calls are free?" I'm sorry, I'll pay for it," I stammered, though I had no idea how. Aunt Linda snorted. "Pay for it? With what? No, you've caused enough trouble. I'm done with it, done with you." Before I could plead, she was on the phone, barking into the receiver. "Yeah, Betty? Get a room ready. She's coming to you." I barely had time to process her words before I found myself holding a bus ticket and a hastily repacked duffel bag. She dumped me at the bus stop with a shake of her head and a good riddance that followed me onto the bus. I was on my way to Grandma's, and as the bus chugged along, the town I knew became a blur. I thought about Mom's voice, that tone I'd never heard before. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, the hum of the engine a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Grandma lived in a smaller town a couple of hours away, in a house that was as old but twice as cozy as Aunt Linda's. She was standing on the porch when I arrived, her eyebrows drawn down in concern. "You okay, Polly?" she asked as I trudged up the steps. I shook my head. Aunt Linda sent me away. Mom doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Grandma sighed, opening her arms wide. I stepped into her hug like it was a safe haven. Families can be tough, she murmured. Come on in, I'll make you some tea. As I sank down at her kitchen table, surrounded by the comforting scent of cinnamon and apples, the warmth of the room unfreezing my fingers, I started to realize something hard. That sometimes, the idea of a parent isn't what you get. And maybe, just maybe, I had to start figuring out how to deal with that. The day I settled into Grandma's house, I could tell it was a different world. The walls were lined with pictures of plants and landscapes, unlike the museums back at Aunt Linda's place. Grandma was already in the kitchen, the heart of her home, humming a tune I didn't recognize. "Gran, you need help with anything?" I called out as I dragged my bag inside. Without missing a beat in her humming, she replied, "Nah, just park yourself at the table. Gonna fix us some grub." Her voice was raspy from years of yelling over the noise of farm machinery back when she used to run the family's apple orchard. Now, the most noise she dealt with was the creaking of the porch swing and the clatter of her old pots and pans. As the weeks passed, I fell into step with her ways. Wake up before the sun, help with breakfast, then off to school. After school, help around the house, dinner, homework, and bed. No frills, no drama. One chilly afternoon, Grandma found me on the porch swing, the horizon painted orange and pink by the setting sun. "Got something to tell ya," she said, pulling the other side of the swing down with her weight. I tightened my grip on the chains of the swing. Whatever it was, Grandma wasn't one for beating around the bush. "You're not just staying here, you know. This isn't temporary." She held out some papers to me. "I've gone and made it official. You're mine now, for good." I scanned the papers. Words like custody and guardianship jumped out at me. She'd done it. "Why'd you do this, Gran?" To me, it seemed like taking on a burden more trouble than a teenage girl was worth. "'Cause you're blood, kid. More than that. You got spirit. Remember, tenderness beneath the strength." She repeated her old saying and tapped her chest. "Right here is where you've gotta be toughest." We sat quiet for a while, the swing creaking under us, the sky darkening. I let her words wrap around me like the quilts on my new bed upstairs. "Thanks, Gran," I finally said. That was all. Thanks. It sounded lame even to my own ears. "Well, don't thank me yet. You'll be pulling extra weeds tomorrow, make no mistake." Her tone was playful, but I knew she'd hold me to it. Sitting on the swing now, a few days after my sweet 16, I could see that Grandma's house wasn't just a haven. It was a starting line. And with her backing, I was finally ready to run my race. The morning sun hadn't even cracked the sky when Grandma kicked the bottom of my bed. "Rise and shine, Doc," she barked, same as she had every morning since I started med school. I groaned, my hand searching for the alarm clock. "It's not even light out, Gran." World don't wait for light. Cows don't milk themselves. Patients don't cure themselves, neither. She didn't have cows to milk, of course. It was about getting a point across, like always. Afternoons at the hospital were a blur of white walls and beeping monitors. By the time I got back, evening had settled in, and the house glowed with warm light. "How'd it go?" Grandma was at the stove, poking at something that smelled like heaven. "Good, real good." I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, watching her move around the kitchen. "Dr. Klein let me lead a minor procedure." She raised her eyebrows, a spoon still in her hand dripping some sauce. "Is that right? And how'd that feel?" "Scary as hell," I admitted. "But I did it, and it went well." "That's 'cause you're made of tough stuff." She plated the food and set it on the small kitchen table. "Earned your stripes today, huh?" "Feels like it," I agreed, diving into dinner. Afterward, we sat on the porch, me with a textbook, her with her knitting. The night was quiet, the only sound the crickets and the occasional turn of a page or click of needles. "Thinkin' of Ted?" she asked out of the blue. Ted was the first boy I brought home, a lifetime ago it seemed. Not much time for that. I didn't even glance up from my book. Relationships took time and energy I didn't have. You make time for what's important, she countered. There's more to life than just work and study. I sighed. Maybe after my residency, Gran. She nodded, knowing that was the best I could offer right then. Just remember, life's short. I smiled at her words, thinking how many times I'd heard just that. Never forget, you got more to give than just being a good doctor. Got a heart that needs sharing too. It was in this simple way that she kept my feet on the ground, reminding me there was a world outside medicine, and one day, I'd be a part of that too. We didn't talk much after that. The night wrapped around us, a blanket of peace as I pondered a future that seemed both exciting and terrifying. As the clock ticked towards tomorrow, I knew one thing for sure, whatever the future held, I'd face it head-on. Just like Grandma taught me. I should have known when Gran missed breakfast for the third day straight. It's nothing, she'd said, waving off my concern. But nothing didn't leave you pale and worn out, nothing didn't whisper lies in a voice that trembled like an old barn in a storm. The news hit like a brick. It's cancer, the doctor told me, voice flat like the EKG I wished was for someone else, anyone else. You serious? I'd asked, eyes darting from the doctor to Gran, who sat there nodding like she'd known all along. As serious as it gets, Gran said. She sat up straight, no tears, just that squared chin that always meant business. The battle was short and fierce, and through it all, she'd never let me see her scared. Until one quiet morning when she finally let go of the fight, the breath slipping from her in a soft sigh, like she was slipping into a warm bath. After, the house felt empty, like someone had scooped out the middle and left me with a shell. I walked through the funeral like someone else, shaking hands, accepting hugs, hearing murmurs of "she loved you like her own." They didn't get it, not really. It wasn't like she was my own, she was my everything. After everyone had gone, I stayed back, leaning on the cool marble, staring at the casket that was too new, too shiny. Left alone, I whispered to Gran, like I used to when it was just me and her against the world. I'll make you proud, I swear. The next morning, I found myself at the hospital, the hall sterile and smelling of disinfectant. My hands were steady, my mind clear. This was where I belonged. I might have lost Gran, but I was going to save others, keep going, just like she would have wanted. In surgery, my hands didn't shake. Gran's strength lived in me. Each stitch was a promise, a testament to her legacy, a legacy of love. Love that didn't end with last breaths or in silent funeral halls. It was the love that pushed you forward when life kicked you in the teeth. The love that made you square your shoulders and face each day knowing you were never really alone. Mom always had a flair for drama, like she could smell money from miles away and come sprinting. The doorbell rang one lazy Sunday, pulling me away from medical journals and a cup of coffee. I opened the door and there they were, like some twisted version of a family reunion photo. Mom looked at me with those hawkish eyes, and before I could even get out a hello, she was in with the ask. You've got to share, it's only fair. Half is ours by rights, she said, her hand fluttering around like a bird trying to get out of a cage. Stepdad just leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He had that look, the one he got when he knew Mom had a great idea. Sarah hung back, not saying a word, just scrolling on her phone. I couldn't help it, a laugh just bubbled up. Oh, you? For what, exactly? Last time I checked, you kicked me out when I was 11. Mom's eyes narrowed to slits. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. That has to be worth something. Fed? Clothed? More like rations and hand-me-downs. I crossed my arms, mirroring stepdad. I was not going to be bullied. But Gran, she said, the word almost a slur, she left you everything, and we're struggling here. Stepdad took a step forward. Listen, just give us what we deserve and we can all walk away from this peacefully. I shook my head, a mix of anger and disbelief churning in my gut. Gran didn't leave you a penny, 'cause she knew exactly what sort of people you are. Matter of fact, you remember that whole thing when I was a kid, about where I came from? Well, turns out Gran adopted me when I was a baby, so legally, I'm not even obligated to give you the time of day, let alone any inheritance. Mom went pale as a sheet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No. Sarah looked up then, her face confused. What's she saying, Mom? Stepdad's face transformed into a dark cloud. She's saying we're not getting a damn thing. That's right, I affirmed. You won't get anything from me. You'll regret this, Stepdad growled, a vein bulging in his neck. I stepped out, bracing myself against the frame of the door, the morning sun hot on my back. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice steelier than I felt. He squared his shoulders, but I wasn't 11 and scared anymore. It's a promise. Mom grabbed his arm, giving me a look that could curdle milk. Let's go, she hissed. I stepped back inside and closed the door, the click of the latch loud in the quiet house. Gran was gone, but she left me more than money. She left me the courage to stand up to them and the sense of worth they'd tried to take from me. Neighbors gave me the heads up with a quick call, that sort of just thought you should know ring that meant trouble. Your mom and her lot set up camp in your grandma's old house, they said, all concerned and a bit gossip hungry. That house was mine and mine alone, Grandma made sure of that. The nerve of them, thinking they could just move in and not one soul would tell me. Guys, I said, knocking on the door louder than necessary, you can't just crash here. This isn't a motel. Mom yanked the door open, a fake smile plastered on her face. Polly, we're family, she exclaimed, leaning against the doorframe like she owned the place. Stepdad loomed behind her, his look less welcoming. We're not going anywhere. This is as much ours as it is yours, he stated with that smug smirk that made my blood heat up. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket. The house is mine, legally. You have one day to get out, or I'm calling the cops. They laughed, the kind that grates on your nerves. Yeah, sure. Call the cops on your family. That'll look great, Stepdad jeered, his arms folded across his chest. I didn't want a scene, but they left me no choice. The next morning, they were still there, lounging around as if they owned the place. That's when I made the call. When the cops rolled up, I could almost taste the sour change in the air. I stood by, arms crossed, watching through the living room window. Ma'am, sir, you need to leave the premises. Now, one officer said firmly, his hand resting near his belt. But she's my daughter, Mom tried to plead, her voice shifting to desperation. And I'm her stepdad, added Stepdad, that tick in his jaw back like a storm warning. Doesn't matter. You don't own this house and the owner wants you out, the second cop chimed in, stepping forward. They'd finally stopped laughing. I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the reality that they couldn't bulldoze their way through life anymore. I didn't budge until their car was a speck in the distance and then turned to face the empty house. It felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. It was quiet, the kind of peace that comes when a storm has passed and left clear skies in its wake. Stepping into the house, the air felt different, lighter. Grandma's voice didn't echo the way it did before, now it was in my own head, words that came like a bomb, soothing over years of scars. With each step, I started to reclaim the space. The kitchen, where Grandma taught me to bake, the living room, where she healed my teenage heartaches with ice cream and tough love, and her bedroom, where she'd say prayers that I'd find my way in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. I made coffee, the aroma filling the space, binding me to this house, this moment. Sitting at the kitchen table, I raised my cup to the new day. Justice served, and served well.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. "Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. "Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company?" Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. "Let's just move on." Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?" "We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, One had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.